Terms like incels and autism are commonly used to demean people on the internet. They're kind of a first go-to in terms of insults. We've heard them so many times that they're completely divorced from their original meaning, that being involuntarily celibate now has almost nothing to do with actual involuntary celibacy. So it was already kind of a linguistically strange term to be using. But now it's been used so much that it's formed into something that looks completely different than what it originally was, like so many words that get thrown around on the internet. So incel basically doesn't mean anything. I mean, you guys all know this. I've spent years on this channel practically talking again and again about how I don't think involuntary celibate people actually exist, that if we're talking in terms of a person having sex, there are plenty of ways you can have sex if given the proper means, and if you know how to get those means, then the end is not so far away. No one is truly involuntarily celibate if there is always a way to have sex. So I think the term is kind of meaningless from its inception because there's no such thing. You can get sex if you try to get sex. It's just that a lot of the people who identify with the term are not willing to do the kinds of things that you would need to do to get sex. And I'm not just talking the standard normie advice that you would normally hear. I'm talking unconventional ways of getting sex as well. With autism is obviously a medical diagnosis. It is a somewhat neurological disorder based on the recognition of certain behaviors and peculiarities. I'm certainly not an expert on it. I don't know a whole ton about autism, but it is not used the way that it is used online in the medical field. When people refer to you as autistic online, usually what they're referring to is a sort of lack of social understanding, like you're doing something that the larger group deems to be strange, unacceptable, or peculiar, and you're telling someone that they're autistic so that they would know to stop, or to point out things that people generally don't like, or maybe it's used in a positive way to say you're autistically obsessed with this one thing. That could be positive, neutral, or negative. It's to point out peculiarities. That is how the internet has morphed the linguistic character of that word, of those words. And I think regardless of what context you come to these words with, in my opinion, they are inherently positive terms to have levied upon you. If someone calls me an incel, or if someone calls me autistic, I'm going to thank them because I strive to be as autistic and as much of an incel as I possibly can, because those two terms stand in defiance to everything that normal people believe. They stand in defiance to all of the societal structures that we would consider to be dominant, that you live your life, you work a job for however many years, you fuck, and then you die, and then that's it. Being autistic and being an incel go straight against all of those things. For one, autistic people actually have interests. They're, again, as I said, obsessively into these things. They have peculiarities that don't allow them to fit in properly at work or in education. Again, using the term as it's defined in the internet sense, and in the case of incels, obviously they're not having sex because it's meant to describe someone who doesn't have sex. All of these things are good things because they stand against things that I would consider bad, which is normal life. And so my goal is to be as autistic as I can, to be as different as I can from other people because I resent other people. In this way, incel is a badge of honor. It's something that if you label me that, I do not label myself that because I think the term is silly and it doesn't make any sense. But if you labeled me that, I'm happy to hear it. I want to hear more of it because at least if I'm considered an incel by society, that means that on some level I'm considered a problem, that on some level I'm considered a pariah, that on some level people do not accept me enough to have to use this term to describe me that has negative connotations ascribed to it. That is a good thing because I hate nearly everything that those normal people who do fit in represent.
I'm gonna fuck the devil in his mouth. I just need to listen to my sickness so I can learn how, and then train for a couple of weeks until I have all the skills I need. The flask is an alcoholic's paintbrush. The flask is an alcoholic's toothbrush. I need to go throw up now. I wanna be the queen of all the belly rubs now. I am gonna quit my job, 'cause I've got another job, and I don't need to work 2 jobs. I guess you could call me lucky.
I finally get to meet you, the person behind the glass. I'm glad. I wanted to thank you. So thank you.
I don't think I've ever explained this in a video, why I have this flag. I think maybe I have. I think there's like one where I mention it as an off-color like joke, and then I have one video where a guy commented an S, and then I replied to the comment, and then I have a video on Production Outlaw, which no one is subscribed to, where I just explain it in like a room tour-esque meme video. The reason I have this Chinese flag up in my room is entirely to offend people. It's a pleb filter, because when you go on my channel, the whole idea of it is that my perspective is going to be abrasive, and so what is the most abrasive thing that I could possibly put on my wall that would immediately make people, especially Americans, go, ew, I don't want to look at this, I'm going to click off? Chinese flag. China is consistently rated as like the most hated country in America. Chinese people are not particularly liked here, especially in the parts of the country that I've lived in. There's a lot of derogatory terms that Americans have come up with to refer to Chinese people in a racist way. Our society, politically, economically, and socially, is very anti-Chinese, or at the very least, very anti-Chinese government. Now, I am no fan of the Chinese government myself. I obviously am a huge advocate for freedom of speech, as well as religious freedoms, as well as legalizing drugs. I mean, you can get the death penalty just for selling weed in China. That's really messed up. There's a lot of really terrible things about their government. I mean, if you want to talk in terms of, like, you know, quote-unquote socialist countries that have existed throughout time, I don't believe China is a socialist country. I think they're a capitalist country. But if you look at the former Soviet Union, drug possession was not a crime for a very long time. It was only producing and distributing them that was a crime. And so, taking a look at the quote-unquote socialist countries that have existed, the USSR certainly had China beat on a number of those fronts in terms of freedom. Again, not to glamorize the Soviet Union, but that's speaking in, you know, if I had to side with one over the other in terms of which is better in history, I would obviously say that the former USSR was better than modern-day China. But that's neither here nor there. So basically, if there's two countries that I take massive issue with, and one of them that I publicly take massive issue with has multiple policies that are significantly better than what China is today, obviously I'm not a supporter of it. And I think a lot of my statements publicly have relayed that. Now, there was a period of my life where I had this sort of almost like accelerationist view in support of China, and it was very silly and bizarre. But that period in time didn't even last like a full year. And so it's mostly just a gag. It's a pleb filter in order to ward off people who would come onto my videos and be immediately bothered by a different opinion. Because I'm not bothered by people who are pro-China. I'm not bothered by people who are racistly anti-China, you know, people who take it to the other logical extreme. I'm not bothered by most perspectives in and of themselves. It's more about how those perspectives are presented. Now, with certain perspectives, like far-right extremism, there tends to be more, or just authoritarianism in general, there tends to be more lenience towards intolerance. There tends to be more lenience towards being a dick. And so, more often, I get annoyed by people who are socially conservative or people who are right-wing, because those views for a lot of people naturally extend towards having behaviors and ideas that I fundamentally morally disagree with. And it shows through their behavior, you know, like the reason why people believe the things they believe is often complicated, but it's also deeply personal. And I think, you know, when you consider the kind of person who would believe in limiting freedom of speech, who would believe in limiting the rights of black and brown people, or just making them go extinct if you want to go way out there, and criminalizing the use of drugs and having all of these strict views on how people should conduct their sex life, etc., usually their personality is also going to be authoritarian. I think that's a fair thing to say. And I generally just don't vibe with authoritarian personalities, because I think they have way too much fucking time on their hands if they care about all of these things, you know? If you care so much about what other groups of people are doing, then clearly you need to get some more interesting hobbies. You know, you need to give a shit about something in your own life, you know? Like, that sort of petty authoritarian mindset is usually of the type of person that I would not be able to get along with. The type of people who I tend to get along with, who also just happen to be on the left, are freedom-minded people, people who embrace the subjective, people who embrace the unknown, who are humble about the things that they don't know, that don't care what you do in your personal life as long as it doesn't affect them, genuinely not care. Like, not, I'm bothered by this in my head, but I'm just going to decide not to say anything about it. Genuinely just, you do what you want to do, and it doesn't affect me. I respect that kind of mindset a lot. I'm sort of that school of thought, and so I tend to get along with those people much more. But it isn't a question of ideology. Like, certain ideologies can lean more into that, but it doesn't, I don't really care what you think one way or the other, as long as the traits that you exemplify are respectful, or at the very, very least interesting. And interestingness can fall on, you know, any side of the spectrum. I'm only going to really get pissed off with you if you are a dick. And being of one side or the other is not necessarily a prerequisite to being a dick inherently. It simply means that you have a different set of values for whatever reason, from whatever place you come from. But it's very complicated. There's a lot of factors that play into it. But in general, I am okay with watching YouTubers who are of all different political sides of the spectrum. And so, yeah, like, if you're not that kind of person, I don't want you in my audience. I don't want you in my audience if you're not open-minded enough to listen to someone who you disagree with. You're just not the kind of person who I would be able to get along with, because I'm just fundamentally opposed to that way of doing things. And if you are that kind of person, I don't give a shit which side you're on. I just want you out, you know? And that's the ultimate pleb filter. So if I can get out all of those people as early as possible by simply putting up a Chinese flag, then that's pretty good grounds to have my community be mainly open-minded people who would accept it, even if that, you know, even if that was what I actually believed and didn't just do it as a joke. So the China flag is a pleb filter. Now you may be wondering about this one. This is the Bhutan flag. Now, I cared a lot about Bhutan in my youth. Like, I thought Bhutan was just the coolest country ever, and I loved, like, the Buddhism aesthetic and whatnot. I don't really care about Bhutan anymore. This flag is mainly up as just a remembrance of that time. I had the Kazakhstan flag up, and that just kept falling down, so I took it off. I think I'm going to put a kanji poster there.
let me begin some evidence that Osaka is a normie. We're at the trial right now. Okay, we're doing a drumhead trial of Osaka Syndrome.
Okay.
You're not beating the normie allegations, Osaka. Okay, first of all, you listen to prog. You literally like the band. You literally like In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. You're literally like, that's the best fucking album ever. Okay, normie. That's number one. Number two, you get hella bitches. You get so many bitches. Is this not true?
I mean, yeah.
Osaka Syndrome gets so many bitches. You can't even complain about any of... the crux of your argument. The crux of your argument rests upon the premise that No Thank You somehow gets bitches. No Thank You does not get bitches. No Thank You did not have a bitch for at least 5 years prior to their current bitch, okay? My client does not get a single bitch. Osaka Syndrome is constantly talking about, there's this new cute girl I'm talking to, there's this new cute guy I'm talking to. Just every other day it's a new bitch, or a new, male bitch. It's constant. And then, because Osaka Syndrome is a giga normie, they basically only care about having sex with this person and then never talk to them again when it turns out they're incompatible. Until, just recently, they actually got a girlfriend. This happened to Osaka Syndrome. This is also the exact thing that happens to every single normie ever. Next, Osaka Syndrome goes outside all the fucking time. Osaka Syndrome is not a hikikomori and hasn't been for years. They go outside constantly. And then they make this insane argument that they're a hiki in the streets, which is complete nonsense, right? That's like it's a statement which is incompatible with itself. It's a paradoxical statement, and they just do this to excuse their behavior because they have this inexorable identitarian tie to the idea of being a hikikomori, even though it hasn't been true about themselves for years. And so in order to not be overwhelmed by cognitive dissonance, they have to invent paradoxical concepts like hiki in the streets. Next, Osaka Syndrome has a good diet and is generally healthy. Osaka Syndrome eats goddamn... What's that shit called? What's the shit they were eating? Muesli or some shit, right? Like, Osaka Syndrome eats like a 27-year-old white girl who does yoga. Like, they actually eat so many fucking vegetables and, like, healthy shit. You know what I be eating? I be eating tendies, motherfucker. I be eating fucking tendies, okay? Fucking Osaka Syndrome came here. I fed him tendies. They were like, no, not fucking tendies. I gotta eat my vegetables. I gotta eat my, like, normie core white woman yogurt and fruit and fucking breakfast type shit. I'm sorry, what? Osaka Syndrome was trying to become a vegan recently. Like, not even that long ago they were trying to become a vegan. Like... It's insane. Okay, the level of normiedom this person's on. You ask this, you ask the accused about any of this sort of thing. Like, what's their favorite movie? It's like probably fucking some Soviet film. It's probably like Stalker or something.
Well, that is on my 3x3. My favorite. I'm making myself look
exactly
worse by telling you what my favorite movie is.
Right, it's like it's The Irishman, right? Osaka Syndrome has first-year film student taste in movies. They're gonna tell you about how Quentin Tarantino is a genius because his dialogue is so good. What's my favorite film? Mean Girls. My favorite film is also kind of normie. It's Tokyo Story, but. Mean Girls isn't.
Why? I just want to point out everything you're saying is true, and it doesn't do anything to damage my standing.
I'm not. You see, unlike you, I am not attempting a character assassination. Okay, all I'm arguing is that those in glass houses should not throw stones.
You think this shit's funny? I don't think this shit's funny. Fuck these Amerimuts, man. Literally no sidewalk. There's just a line. There's just a fucking line. And then I have to deal with shit like that coming my way. God damn. How much fucking longer is there on this goddamn road? Christ. I have to literally jump to the side every fucking time. Every fucking time someone rolls through like I'm about to get the shit kicked out of me. Goddamn. Alright then. All to walk to a job interview. It's really quite involved, don't you think? Or I can, like, sit up here, I guess? Jesus Christ, I got a long-ass way to go, man. I got a long-ass way to go. The hardest part is starting. This is the beginning to a motivational speech I once heard years ago. It rang true when I was mulling over which project to make every day in absence of any friends or anything else to pay mind to, and by which project I mean slamming my head against the wall in desperation for an idea to appear in it, and it rings true now as I am more uninspired, bereft of creativity, and absent of any mind whatsoever. To the point of blankness on the level of a white wall chroma keyed onto an empty warehouse painted green. What is it about the color white that's more blank than uniform green in an empty space? I'm not sure. Take it up with culture. Advocates for a schedule would, at this point, exclaim zealously and without impunity that I have a sleeping problem. I neither wake up nor sleep at the same time each day, and this has been a relative consistency throughout my entire life, to the point where it's both disturbed parents and pets for me of yesterday, and in the bed of lovers for the me of today. To cap that off, it's exceptionally common that I sleep in bursts rather than full cycles, a few hours here and a few hours there with a strict inclination towards the nocturnal. This can be attributed to, like most things in human behavior, genetic and environmental factors. My father has never been able to hold the same job. The longest one he had ever held was for more than a year, and that was quite recent. In order to sleep on the same track, he employed various psychoactive substances to either stay awake or fall asleep, depending on what the situation required. And while discipline can mitigate one's genetic predilections to some extent, I had none. Growing up homeschooled, the flexibility of my sleep schedule was far and wide, with the one caveat being that I generally trended towards the daytime. Although, even that had exceptions. See my wild forays into nighttime homeschooling that occurred primarily a few times when I was a child, and became the predominant mode of my quote-unquote education in my early teens. Did I mention that despite being homeschooled, I had the same break schedule of my publicized peers? With parents that didn't enforce a bedtime, you can guess what edge of the clock I leaned on during those periods. Upon being cast off to the whims of the public education system when I was 12 or so, with all the unbending entrapment of prison, immediately my sentencing was marred by an incapability to adapt to its resounding rigidity. I awoke in an irrepressible haze of angst at the air now quickly entering my lungs, and half-lit eyelids that looked as inoperable as they functioned. Man does not delight me, nor woman neither, but by your smiling you seem to say so. That part was a reference to Hamlet. It's about depression. I have depression. Having only a few hours of sleep meant either working on a few hours of sleep or sleeping instead of working. In the event that I worked, it was unlikely that I'd come to sleep because my precious time would not be spent exclusively on things I vehemently detested. Can you guess how many vent posts I made on my microblog Facebook, and how many used the word disdain? Days awake, a pattern. Now then, if I were to sleep in the class, that would necessarily mean that I no longer needed to sleep at night, or at least it was something. Fast forward to just before 8th grade, and I was a problem child. My fighting at school led to, after a round of shouting matches, me being homeschooled again. Only 2 years and a quarter imprisoned. My parents, with their subsequent on-and-off relationship status, in tandem with my mother's general ineptitude with electronic devices, did not surveil my progress. As such, I stayed up at night and made/watched content for/on the internet, and the few times my sleep schedule was questioned, it could easily be justified by saying that our data allowance with HughesNet, satellite internet, was higher at nighttime, so I had to do it. You know, to save data for everyone else. This was the evolution of where I am now. I had a few months into 9th grade with many absences, a visit to truancy court before dropping out for the rest of my life, and you can imagine what my sleep was like during those few months leading up to December when we said fuck it again. Pro strat, keep your monitor swiveling and under a blanket next to your bed to watch anime whilst listening for footsteps, so you know when to hide underneath the covers again with the monitor off. I valued my free time. So here I am about to turn 20 with a long track record of weird sleep. With schedules out the window, my pathway to consistency has been to do things regardless of them. Whatever will bemark today. That's my starting point, my guiding hand and benevolent master, beckoning me as I write in pursuit of some idea of productivity that fits snugly within the bounds of quote-unquote every day. I suppose this isn't so different than when I was writing blog posts in 2016 about how I needed to do things, and the post itself was an example of me doing a thing whilst breaking down the way in which I do things. The more things change, the more they stay the same, eh?
I haven't had sleep. I haven't been able to sleep.